It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. As most of you know who have heard this program before, this is a show about all the great stuff going on at the University of Louisville. So on the show today, U of L has received a huge federal grant to study bacteria, fungi, and protozoans. All those great things in your mouth and digestive system and how that impacts inflammation and disease in your entire body. We'll talk to a couple of U of L researchers on that project. And U of L has another 10 students awarded with the prestigious Fulbright Scholarships this year. We'll talk to one of them about where she's going in the world and what she'll be doing. But our first segment is Better Health Together, sponsored by U of L's partners at Passport Health Plan, the nonprofit community-based organization that's been managing Medicaid benefits for thousands of Kentuckians for more than 20 years and is a great partner with the University of Louisville. You've probably heard of the world's first cancer vaccine, the HPV vaccine. It's been somewhat controversial, sort of, but that hasn't stopped Kentucky college students from getting the vaccine and wanting their sexual partners to have the vaccine. Scott LaJoie is an associate professor in health promotion and behavioral science who has studied the issue of college students and the HPV vaccine. Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see you, Mark, and thank you for inviting me on today.
Sure. So you did a study. You talked to U of L students, right, about whether they got the HPV vaccine. All right. Well, let's talk about the HPV vaccine. What is it, first off?
Well, let me give a little background first about the types of cancers that are preventable or attributed to HPV. We know that every year there's about 41,000 new cases of cancer that are directly linked to an HPV infection. In women, about half of these cancers are in the cervix.
Cervical cancer.
Cervical cancer. We know that 90% of all cervical cancers are actually caused by HPV. In men, 80% of the cancers occur in mouth or throat, what we call oropharynx. And while these numbers aren't really huge compared to something like lung cancer, cancers caused by HPV are largely preventable with the vaccine.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the first cancer vaccine in the world, right?
Right. So it seems like a no-brainer.
Seems like a no-brainer. So you could get this HPV vaccine. So you went around and asked U of L students whether they were getting the vaccine or not. What'd you find?
Right. So we interviewed nearly 600 introductory psychology students, and we asked them a range of things about their knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs, their vaccine status, those types of things. And what we found, first off, was that 68% of women undergraduate students in our study and 28% of males had already been vaccinated, or at least had one dose of the vaccine. Now, if you compare,
and it's a 3-dose thing, right?
It's well, at the time of the study, Gardasil 4 was the predominant vaccine, and that was a 3-dose vaccine.
Okay.
The current vaccine is Gardasil 9, which is only a 2-dose vaccine.
Okay.
But if you look at U of L's rate at 68% for women and 28% for men, that compares really favorably to the national average, which is about 48.5% for women and 13% for men.
So U of L students are getting vaccinated at a higher rate than the national average.
They are.
Of college students at their same age.
At least from the study that of our sample.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So I assume that's good.
Yeah, I would think so.
So why are they getting the vaccine? I mean, there's been some controversy about the HPV vaccine. It's been refuted pretty much that there's no side effects to it. But there's still some folks out there saying, I don't know about that vaccine. So why are U of L students getting it at this high rate?
Well, the vaccine's been out since 2006, and then when the APIC started recommending it for girls, and then 5 years later they started recommending it for boys. So it's been in the mainstream medical
the media. It's been out there.
Yeah, for a long time.
Mainstream treatment. Most doctors are recommending
it. And so it's becoming more commonplace. What we noticed in our data set was that older students were far less likely to have been vaccinated than the younger students. So that suggests to us that there's an increasing trend of kids coming into the school that are being vaccinated, and probably because it's becoming a norm.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask you. Were most of these college students at U of L getting the vaccine when they were 13, 14 years old, or were they waiting until they were like 18 or 19 and just entering college?
Well, we know, we didn't ask that specifically from our study, but what we know nationally is that about 10% of people getting the vaccine are getting it after the recommended age, which would be about 11 or 12.
Okay.
But the vaccine you can get the vaccine up to 26, which means that there's a catch-up period of time, which is good for college students, because if they didn't get it, when they were 11 or 12.
Right. They need to catch up.
Yeah.
We're talking with Scott LaJoie, who's an associate professor in health promotion and behavioral science, who has studied the issue of the HPV vaccine and college students. Did you find that the majority of college students who wanted to get the vaccine or did get the vaccine did so because their parents told them they had to?
So that's an interesting question. We asked who the most important influence was in their vaccine decision. And overwhelmingly, more than 60, close to 70% of all respondents said the decision was theirs alone. They were
Really?
They were the most important choice.
As teenagers?
As teenagers.
So the parents said...
This is what they say. Yes.
Okay. Well, it could be. Parents
could be.
might have said, hey, I really think you should get this, but it's your choice if you want to or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Among those who were vaccinated, about 12% of them said their parents were the most important decision maker. Interestingly for us was that physicians were the least influential person in the decision, at least according to our sample.
Well, you don't have kids going to the doctor very much, so they probably didn't have much interaction with their physician telling them, hey, you ought to get this HPV vaccine, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think college students are starting, first of all, they're becoming more and more engaged in their own healthcare, and they want to play a bigger role in determining what treatments they receive, what tests they receive. And we see that because a lot of them wanted to participate in the shared decision-making process.
Right. We're talking with Scott LaJoie, an associate professor in health promotion and behavioral science at the University of Louisville. And the segment is part of Better Health Together, which is sponsored by UofL's partners at Passport Health Plan. Did you find that the majority of the students, or maybe you didn't even ask it, the majority of the students who said that their parents played a role, were they coming from highly educated families? Or did that play any role?
No, we didn't ask that specifically.
Okay.
U of L's general population has a large number of first-generation students, so it's feasible that a good part of our sample would be that way too.
Did the cost of the vaccine play a role?
It did not. We asked that specifically, and we asked if it influenced their decision, their past decision, but they did say that if the vaccine were free, it would encourage them more.
Okay. Well, of course, you're a college student. You don't have any money.
Exactly.
If it's a free vaccine, you're going to take it, right?
Exactly.
And you also worked a little bit on a previous study of the HPV vaccine, where it was the mother-daughter relationship and what impact that played on whether the young girl would get the vaccine or not. What did you find?
Yeah, so that was a study that I did with some faculty in nursing, and we looked at mother-daughter decision-making processes. And the idea, well, the daughters in that situation were, in fact, young teenagers, 11, 12, 13-year-old. What we found was that while the mother's attitudes and beliefs were strongly predictive of vaccine status, if we asked the daughter whether or not they preferred to be vaccinated, it was unrelated to what the mother wanted. So in that situation, the mom was making all the decisions.
So help me out here. So the majority of daughters said that their moms really didn't play much of a role in their decision to get the HPV vaccine?
No,
or was it the other way around?
Just the opposite.
Okay, they did play a big role.
It was the moms didn't really listen much to what the kids were saying.
They said, "You're getting the damn vaccine.
One way or
Shut
the,
up. We're going to the doctor to get it."
Precisely.
Okay. What would you say to folks who say, I've heard this stuff on social media and other places about the HPV vaccine, that it can cause neurological problems in some kids, and I've seen some of these crazy videos. What would you say to those folks who are questioning whether they should give their kid the vaccine?
Well, ever since the Lancet published the data on the falsified data linking autism to vaccination, there's been a lot of internet chatter about vaccines and neurological disorders. And yet there's never been a single study that it's been conclusive in saying, yes, vaccines cause neurological disorders. And in fact, we have 10 years of data from HPV vaccination. We've got 60 years of data from the MMR and Tdap and all the other vaccines that we get, and there's very, very little, if any, evidence of connection to neurological disorders. It's mostly hype.
So you tell them go ahead and get the vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can stop cervical cancer.
Well, it's not just cervical cancer, but there's also cancers associated with the anus, with the vagina, with the vulva, with the penis, and mouth and throat cancers. Not to mention those pesky warts that you can get, or genital warts.
Right.
And there's no treatment for HPV, so that's an important thing. If you get it, and 80% of us will. Right now, there's 80 million people in the U.S. currently who have HPV, it's estimated. So it's extremely common. It's vaccine preventable, and it's linked to 7 different types of cancers so far. It's a no-brainer.
Well, we haven't even talked about the men and how they relate to the HPV vaccine. You said what percentage of the UofL students that you surveyed of the guys had gotten the vaccine?
It's about 30%.
That's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
Yeah, because you don't normally hear much about guys getting the vaccine.
Right. And that's in large part due to the fact that the message was, this is a vaccine that prevents a cancer in women, cervical cancer. All the men in our study, all the women knew cervical cancer was linked, right? That's all we ever hear about. But we don't hear about penile cancer or anal cancer or oral cancers. And oral cancers, for instance, are on the rise. It's becoming quite an issue. Mm-hmm. So we haven't had enough attention paid to the cancers that affect men. We asked the students, particularly the male students, what was their motivation in terms of getting the vaccine, and what they said was to protect their partners. They also need to realize that they're protecting themselves.
Well, that's interesting. You got to wonder now if on college campuses across America, that's one question that's getting asked. God forbid, mom and dad, there's a one-night stand going on here, but there's a discussion going on between some of these students going, hey, have you had the HPV vaccine?
Well, we asked that question. We asked, would you engage in the conversation with your partner about your vaccine status? And the majority would not. And the majority,
really, they wouldn't ask.
They wouldn't ask.
Well,
so
that'd be a tough question to ask if it's a first-time sexual partner.
Yeah. Exactly. And a condom doesn't protect you against HPV spread because it's spread, through the mouth and other
orally or any other way. Through saliva, those kinds of things. All right. Well, Scott, this has been very interesting discussion. Kind of interesting notes. I've got 2 kids, one who's 25, one who's 22, and I think they both had the vaccine.
Good. And both my boys who are in their teens have been vaccinated as well.
Very good. All right. Scott LaJoie, Associate Professor in Health Promotion and Behavioral Science. Thanks for being on the show. UofL has received a pretty big federal grant. It's about a little over $11 million over 5 years to study stuff that all of us have in our bodies, bacteria, yeast, fungi, to see how they can impact our overall health. The guy who got the grant is Richard Lamont, chair of the Department of Oral Immunology and Infectious Diseases at UofL, and he's here along with Juhi Bagaitkar, who's an assistant professor in the same department and one of the main researchers for this grant. So welcome to both of you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the grant, Richard.
Yes, thank you.
11 million and change, right?
11 million and change over 5 years, yes. So we're very pleased the federal government is recognizing the University of Louisville as becoming a center of excellence in this area, like you say, where we have the interface between the host and the organisms that inhabit everybody's body and how that can affect either health or disease. And the space we're working in is that interface, how we can direct these organisms to keep us healthy and prevent them from transitioning into a sort of more pathogenic entity and causing disease.
So I was right about all the stuff that sounds bad in your body. When you say bacteria in your body and those kinds of things, it sounds bad, but it's really not unless it goes haywire, right?
Right. So people are conditioned to think bacteria are bad and germs are bad, but really, germs are good, and humans have evolved a relationship with their indigenous organisms, and that relationship is part of what keeps us healthy. And over the years, we've come to appreciate even more of this hygiene hypothesis, that a lot of the diseases that we suffer from more and more these days, autoimmune diseases, or even things like peanut allergies, are due to us not being properly exposed to these organisms when we're children. We're possibly, it's good to be hygienic, but we can possibly go too far and prevent children from being exposed to the organisms they would naturally be exposed to, which primes and develops their immune system and ultimately keeps us long-term healthy.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more in broader terms about what you're going to be looking at, but Juhi, you're going to be working on this grant. and doing some research on it. Specifically, what are you looking at? You're in the dental field, so is it just mouth-related stuff that you're looking at, or more whole body interest?
Well, I'm looking at something which is broadly applicable to like a lot of different aspects. Not only is it relevant in your mouth, but also extends to other organs. So I look at how, your body has a huge turnover on a daily basis. It generates and kills like 1 billion cells a day. And when you clear, so many cells die as a process of natural tissue turnover, they need to be cleared in a manner that does not cause inflammation. So some of the projects in the lab basically are looking at what are the molecular mechanisms of this clearance, and if bacteria, as Rich was talking about, if they're present in your mouth, can they dysregulate this process and cause you to be more predisposed or susceptible to a lot of autoinflammatory conditions.
So we're really looking at bacteria and microbiota, those kinds of things that can cause other health problems in your body.
Right.
And does it all start with the mouth? Since you guys are both in the dental area, does it all start with the mouth, or
Well,
not?
we'd like to say it all started with the mouth, but that's a big part of it. But there, there's obviously a lot of organisms in your GI tract and other mucosal surfaces in the body, and it's when these relationships kind of get a little bit out of balance that's when disease kind of occurs. So normally there's a commensurate or homeostatic or balanced interaction between us and them. And like we were saying, that's what keeps us healthy. But if say, a bacteria gains access to a site it wasn't previously, or if it gets into the bloodstream, that's when disease can occur. Or if our own defenses are compromised, if we become immune compromised, or for any other reason, then the host side is a little bit down, and the bacteria and other organisms can take advantage of that.
And Juhi, as part of your research, if the body doesn't get rid of these old cells in the correct way, can it impact your heart, your liver, your kidneys, other stuff, your brain?
Yeah, definitely. If they're not cleared, what they'll do is they'll just accumulate. It's like accumulating corpses in your body, and eventually, they'll
lovely.
Cellular corpses, and then they'll kind of burst open and release a lot of contents which are inflammatory. And it's especially now, there's a lot of literature and it's an accepted fact in a lot of cardiovascular disease, especially atherosclerosis. Like in your heart, like one of the mechanisms why the way your plaque builds up and eventually lead to obstruction is because of dysregulated manner in which these cells are cleared. So it's definitely a factor in cardiovascular diseases as well as certain inflammatory bowel diseases as well.
So basically, these zombie cells need to be cleared, otherwise.
The zombie cells? Is that what you call
There's
them?
going to be a zombie attack on various places in the body.
And as part of your research, figuring out how to clear them quickly?
Yes, because you have another specialized cell doing this on a daily basis, and a lot of cells do it, but it becomes a logistic problem, because you're eating another cell and you're kind of doubling your volume. So you have to dedicate a significant effort to actually do this process in a regulated manner and not mount an immune response to self while maintaining the ability to fight infection.
Okay. Again, we're talking with Juhi Bagaitkar, who's an assistant professor in the oral immunology and infectious disease branch, and Richard Lamont, who's the chair of that department. And we're talking about a big federal grant, a little over $11 million over 5 years that UofL got to study some of these issues. I asked Juhi that question, but Richard, the bigger question, I think, for most folks is, how do I know if I've got bad stuff in my body or my bacteria is going bad or whatever, and that I should come to a doctor or a dentist or somebody to try and figure out whether I'm going haywire?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no really good way to know ahead of time. So regular checkups at the dentist, for example, is keeps the organisms under control, and just regular oral hygiene, just to prevent them from becoming too abundant. Clean them with the toothbrush, mouth rinse, floss. Go get professionally cleaned every couple of weeks, normally or every couple, twice a year. Normally in the GI tract and other surfaces, they're kind of self-regulating, but that something's going wrong when you start to have symptoms.
And I know Craig McLean at the University of Louisville is working on gut bacteria and what its impact can have on the brain, the heart, and other areas of the body. You're working on bacteria in the mouth and other places. What do you hope comes out of this research? What do you want, 5 years from now to be able to say or to tell researchers or dentists or doctors, those kinds of folks?
So 5 years from now and down the line, I mean, we hope, first of all, to have trained a new cohort of investigators and clinicians to have a better awareness of these intricacies of what's going on in the human body. And we also hope to be able to sort of start moving down a path where, rather than just a non-specific, indiscriminate attack on these organisms, like with antibiotics that just kills good organisms and bad organisms alike, we hope to be able to have more targeted approaches where we can intervene with organisms just as they're starting to become out of control, or intervene on the host side just as it starts to get out of balance, and be able to adjust these parameters early in the process, so we don't need to take the broader, more severe drugs. And also then limit the use of antibiotics. And, as you know, antibiotic resistance is a huge problem. And we're facing a doomsday scenario where antibiotics are just going to stop being useful. So we hope to be able to develop other mechanisms for intervening early in these diseases to prevent us needing antibiotics.
When we announced this grant, we talked about it as an interdisciplinary grant. What does that mean?
Well, interdisciplinary, I think you mentioned some of these other sites and the other researchers at the University of Louisville that are also doing outstanding and federally recognized as work. So ultimately, we hope to be able to integrate what's happening in the mouth, what's happening in the liver, what's happening in the GI tract, to get a broader picture of the common parameters that are relevant to all of these situations. And if we can identify either organisms or specific metabolomic events in these organisms that might be related to health or might be related to disease, and when we can have an overall picture of the human body and be able to have better interventions in those cases.
Juhi Bagaitkar, how could your research ultimately help someone down the road? What do you see as the ultimate outcome?
Well, I work on, it kind of complements what Richard spoke about, but specifically what I'm doing, you have a big emergence. The biggest problem coming up right now is autoimmune disorders. And while we can use immunosuppressive drugs mostly to target them, you don't really understand, like, during the course of one's life, like, how they develop. So, like, not having appropriate exposure to the right kind of bacteria early can be one of the drivers. And the host side of things is also important. So, like, my work probably will help devise, give you a better understanding of some of these concepts, like how apoptotic cells or dead cells are cleared, and how they can potentially lead to these kind of disorders. And then you can actually devise therapies which will assist or enable their efficient clearance, and therefore kind of reduce your risk for these kind of disorders.
Richard, this is a COBRA grant. What's COBRA?
Well, COBRA is, in one hand, a poisonous snake. But in this particular instance, it stands for Center of Biomedical Research Excellence. And again, this is a program that the government has set up to recognize and encourage multidisciplinary research that has these broader overall goals. And specifically, it encourages us to pair senior investigators, well-established investigators, with talented up-and-coming investigators such as Dr. Bagaitkar, and so synergize these interactions, which the types of thing that should happen in a university, but providing a financial incentive obviously makes these things go a little bit better. And that's going to help us with training this next generation of researchers and clinicians.
And final question, you kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but what does this say about the University of Louisville and your department and the other researchers at the University of Louisville, that we can get a big grant like this to do this kind of work?
I mean, I think it speaks volume for the trajectory that the university is on, and also for the interdisciplinary research that's already going on and here within the dental school and the medical school, and individual researchers and departments working together. On one hand, the federal government is, there's all sorts of cliches about the government, but it's very hard to fool them to get, research dollars. So for us to be able to get this level of funding means they recognize that we have something that's worth encouraging and worth developing here, and I think that's very good for the university.
Richard Lamont, Juhi Bagaitkar, thanks for being on the show. I'm here with Katie Maurer, who is a graduating senior from the University of Louisville, and she is a Fulbright Scholar winner, which is a very big deal. Congratulations, Katie.
Thank you so much.
Where are you going on your Fulbright?
I'm going to Spain, the region of Galicia, which is northwest, right above Portugal.
Why Spain?
I studied abroad there. I went to Segovia, and I really enjoyed the culture and different aspects of it. Especially, there's a huge history of storytelling, which is a lot of what I wrote about for my application for the grant. And I've loved stories ever since I was little, and growing up, and hearing them, and then going to see how a different culture approaches storytelling has just been really wonderful. So I'm excited to go there. And Galicia is actually the home to the end of the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrimage. And so there are going to be people from all around coming to that region, and I'm really excited to hear their stories as well.
So you kind of foretold what my next question was going to be. What are you going to be doing specifically in Spain?
So I'll be assistant teaching English in a elementary or high school. I haven't received my specific placement yet, but one of those two. And I will also be starting a side project, which I've elected to be a drama club. So based on what I said about storytelling, you could see the relationship there. And that'll be with the school community, or potentially just in the city community in general, depending on the location.
So you've got a Spanish major at UofL, right?
Yes, indeed.
And what else?
Middle and secondary education.
So what do you want to do?
I hope to teach Spanish, or potentially English as a second language, which a lot of my classes at UofL help me foster an interest in, but there are fewer jobs than that, at least in the United States, in some places. So it just depends, but one of those two things.
And I guess, as I've asked others, to tell folks out there who have no idea what a Fulbright Scholarship is, what is it? What is a Fulbright?
Yeah, so it's an award of study, research, or English teaching, where they send students from the United States who are recent graduates or master's students to other countries to be a cultural ambassador, basically on behalf of the United States, and to witness cultural exchange and help in whatever way they can to foster relationships between different nations.
What happened at UofL to get you to apply for a Fulbright Scholarship, or motivated you to do that?
Yeah, well, definitely my study abroad, going to Spain. The Office of Study Abroad here was super helpful in that. And then I had a lot of friends who had applied for the Fulbright Scholarship, and some who received it, that were really inspiring to me. And I honestly don't think that I would have believed that I ever could have a Fulbright Scholarship or even get through the process of applying without the support that I've gained from the people at UofL, be it my friends, my professors, like Dr. Condon and the whole Office of International Scholarships and Exchange. Also, my academic advisor, Luke Buckman, was a huge player in my success, definitely. He just helped me foster a spirit of being able to do things and believing in me, even when, and especially when I couldn't believe in myself or didn't believe in myself. And also my experiences at the College of Education and Human Development, where I was able to observe in Jefferson County Public Schools in ESL classrooms. There was one specific one in a middle school where I just ignited my desire to teach, and especially to teach ESL and learn more about different cultures and things like that.
Did you ever think Katie Maurer from Northern Kentucky going to the University of Louisville would ever wind up with a Fulbright Scholarship to Spain?
Absolutely not. I am still in utter disbelief that I am here and being interviewed by anyone ever. So it's a really huge deal, and I never would have expected it.
What'd your parents say when they found out you won this?
They were a mixture of extremely excited and a little bit sad that I'd be moving away for a year. They were obviously the first people that I told, and my dad was in disbelief, and he was like, "This is one of the best things that you've ever done. I'm so proud of you." And that felt really good, obviously, but I will miss them in Spain, so I have to say that, or else they would, be mad.
So when you get back, what will you tell folks about, or what do you hope to tell folks about your Fulbright and your year in Spain and your experience at the University of Louisville? What would you tell them?
Wow. Well, definitely that UofL is absolutely the place to be if you're trying to apply for a competitive scholarship like this. We have rivaled Stanford in the past and our top producer of Fulbrights, and we really stand up to that in terms of the supports that are given to us. And so definitely that's what I would say about UofL is come here if that's your interest. And as for my time in Spain, I hope to tell people that I learned so much, grew so much, had an amazing time, and hopefully will return eventually.
Katie, congratulations.
Thank you so much.